Saludos a toda la afición de la lucha libre. Este que les habla es Michael Morales Torres, integrante del equipo de Lucha Libre Online. Y tenemos el enorme privilegio de presentarles a nuestra invitada especial en la noche de hoy. Gente de Tampa, Florida, para el mundo, ex superestrella de la WWE, the original and roller skating diva. Cherry is in the house here on Lucha Libre Online. Cherry, it is an honor for us to have you here. How are you doing today?
Oh, thank you so much. I'm doing fantastic. I'm so excited to have this interview with you.
Thank you. We are excited as well to have you here because we didn't saw you for a long time inside the pro wrestling industry. But suddenly everything changed. And there was a particular reunion a few weekends ago in New York where we saw Deuce, Domino, and Cherry for the first time together since like 10 plus years. How do you felt going back again inside the pro wrestling industry? But most importantly, how do you felt seeing your brothers for the first time in like 10 years?
It was great. It was great because we hadn't seen each other in so long, but it felt very natural. We were very connected just with the gimmick and really had each other's futures really at the forefront of our minds way back when. So it was nice to kind of reunite and see them, and they're both doing great. And most importantly, like, we had so many fans that came out because it had been so long. So it was so great to see everybody. Everybody was so excited. We had a really, really good turnout. So it was a really great weekend. So it was awesome. It was so good.
I'll translate that briefly to Spanish. ¿Qué sintió Cherry al ver a sus compañeros, a Deuce y a Domino, por primera vez en más de 10 años? Se sintió emocionada, vio que estaban bien, se sintió contenta de estar de regreso a la industria de la lucha libre, pero principalmente de ver a Domino y a Deuce después de tanto tiempo. ¿A quién no le emocionaría si viajó durante mucho tiempo con ellos? And I wanted to, the next question is basically about your origins inside the pro wrestling industry, because we saw the Cherry version on WWE. And at least I saw a little bit of Miss Elizabeth over there. So what inspired you to become part of the pro wrestling industry?
I was a huge fan, as a lot of people were. I watched it Saturday mornings. My brother would hog the TV, and I ended up just watching wrestling with them and getting really, really hooked. The whole ambiance of Randy Savage and Elizabeth, it was just intriguing as everybody was drawn to them as well. And she just brought such a elegance, and she didn't do much, but it was just so much. It's like less is more. And it really just drew me into that, and just his persona to her persona. And it just worked really well. And it just had so many different ways that they entertained with that angle and their characters and stuff. So it always, those two specifically always had me at the edge of my seat, no matter where the storyline was going. So being very young, I never thought, oh, I want to be a pro wrestler. I didn't know how you could get into the wrestling world. And, that was never like something that I wanted to do. I was just such a huge fan and just couldn't wait for the Saturday night main events. And if I could stay up that late, sometimes it was too late and I just fall asleep waiting for it. And but that was really kind of starting then, and not until later, many years later in my life, did I realize, oh, wow, you actually trained to be a wrestler. So it kind of started out as a fan and worked my way up to that.
I'll translate that. ¿Qué o quién inspiró a Cherry a ser luchadora o a ingresar a la profesión de la industria de la lucha libre? Como todo niño en esos años se desvelaba viendo Saturday Night Main Event o Saturday Night Live en aquel momento dado de WWF, y veía figuras como Miss Elizabeth, como Randy Savage, y fueron esas historias interminables en ese periodo de tiempo que todo el tiempo eran frescos, específicamente entre esos dos, que la cautivaron. Más adelante se da cuenta como que, oye, tienes que entrenar para ser luchador. You need to train to be a pro wrestler. Y entonces ahí va descubriendo un poquito más sobre esta industria. When was the moment you decided, okay, I want to do this. I want to actually be a pro wrestler. And how do you approach your first gyms and trainers at that time?
Well, I was actually working at a cellular wholesaler selling cell phones. And I became friends with someone there whose uncle was a promoter. Oh. And she's like, you should really talk to my uncle since you know wrestling and like wrestling so much. So never met him, just on the phone, talked to him. And he's like, wow, you really know a lot about wrestling. And I watched it forever. So for a girl, at least, I knew a lot, he said. So he's like, you should come to one of my wrestling shows. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what independent wrestling was. And so he put me in contact with another local promoter that had a show close by to when we were talking. And so I just went and I just sat and watched the show, and I was like, oh, wow, this is interesting. And then I kind of just started talking to him and some of the other wrestlers on the show. And then they kind of educated me on, well, there's an independent scene and you go to a wrestling school and, that kind of stuff. So I started learning from there, and he offered me to be a ring girl at one of his shows, and kind of started really easily transitioned into ring girl to, they wanted me to be a manager, and and I took to it, obviously, because I loved wrestling. I was like, yeah, I'll be a manager. I could be a Miss Elizabeth, just stand there on the side of the ring. And then that got boring, and I was like, I want to learn how to take bumps and, kind of progress from there. So slow progression.
I'll translate that interesting story. Cuando ella estaba trabajando en una tienda de celulares, su amiga tenía un tío que era promotor. Entonces la amiga le dice como que, oye, mi tío es promotor, deberías hablar con ella, que a ti te gusta esto de la lucha libre. Y habla con él, una cosa lleva a la otra, y ese promotor habla con otro y la ayudan a que vea su primer show independiente, porque ella no sabía lo que era la lucha libre independiente en aquel momento. Ella solamente veía WWF. Entonces tiene esa primera exposición, llega allí, se sienta, le gusta lo que ve, le ofrecen ser una ring girl inicialmente, y ella dice que sí. Posteriormente se convierte en manejadora, que claramente, puedo hacer como Miss Elizabeth, vamos a hacer esto, claro que sí. Y entonces ingresa de esa manera, y como ella dice, se volvió un poquito aburrida en un punto, y posteriormente dice, ok, quiero luchar, y empieza a tomar sus primeros bumps. Once you started, taking bumps, do you remember that first bump particularly? Because it usually sucks for everyone. Were the trainings what you expected?
Oh, it was tough because the local wrestling school to me had 2 rings, and I had to start out in the boxer's ring. So that had no give like a wrestling ring. So it was quite tough. Your body definitely has to learn how to adjust and adapt to it. So it wasn't fun, but I had always said to myself, as long as I'm having fun, I'll continue to do it. So that first bump was memorable.
I'll translate that. Su primer bump o su primera caída no fue en un ring tradicional, fue en un ring de boxeo, fue un boxing ring. No hay protección, no hay nada de eso, es la madera nada más. Hace la caída y claramente se acuerda de él porque fue horrible, el dolor fue asqueroso, y eso es parte de la experiencia de ser luchador. Fast forwarding a little bit in time, you had your graduation from your pro wrestling school and you are entering your first pro wrestling match. So what was the first thing that went through your mind seconds before going outside and seeing, the people going through the curtain and feeding on the audience's energy in your first match?
Managing or my first wrestling match?
Wrestling match. This is
first
completely different.
Match. I was terrified. I thought I am going to forget everything I need to do. I'm, too green to talk on the fly and just come up with something can happen, and I just freeze. So it was very frightening. It actually took me a long time to get comfortable where I could just start to go in the ring and have pieces. So it took me a long time before I really got comfortable where I didn't have to plan everything out and I have a good idea. So it was good that I started out a little bit just standing out at the ring, then starting to get some manager spots, then incorporating a bump. And then, so I took that easy road to really understand how effective you can be before I could get into the wrestling ring. Cause then I didn't have to worry about some of that other stuff. And it got a little bit second nature, but that first time I thought I was going to forget everything. Like I was just, like stone faced the whole time. So it was very memorable, but I'm glad that I was able to move on from that, progress from that, and get that experience. There's no other experience you can do than being on the independents.
I'll translate that. En su primera lucha, obviamente, estaba aterrorizada. Era su primera lucha. ella menciona que tuvo la oportunidad de hacer una transición saludable, pues de ring girl a manejadora a luchadora, para comprender todos los aspectos de segunda naturaleza de la industria. Pero una vez llega ahí, obviamente tenía esta cara de asustada completamente todo el tiempo. Ella pensaba que se le iba a olvidar todo. No fue lo que esperaba, pero lo que sí está agradecida es que tuvo la oportunidad de hacer esa transición saludable y de llegar eventualmente a progresar como lo hizo. Fast forwarding a little bit in time after you're running the independent circuit, you had the opportunity to sign with that old developmental territory from WWE that everyone loves to hate. I mean, loves to hate because some people hated it, some people loved it. So it depends on who you talk about it with. So you signed with OVW on 2005, or at least you got granted your first opportunity back then. Who was the first person that contacted you and say, hey, we want to bring you in here to OVW?
So I had networked a lot on the independents, traveled a lot, got to know a lot of people. So I had a friend that was already down there. He got signed. He moved to OVW, ended up getting an opportunity. He got signed and informed me that they were having like a OVW tryout training weekend. And it was made very clear it was OVW. It wasn't WWE because it was the territory, like you said at the time. So I was living with my boyfriend, Judas Young, at the time. And I was like, I'll go do it. 3 days. I do that on the weekends anyway. I'm like, whatever, I'll just do it. Not going to put any pressure on myself. So I signed up. Well, first I didn't think I was going to get accepted. Then I get accepted and I'm like, I'll just go do it. I go down there, it's 3 days. And I knew some of the people already in the tryout training class, which was great. And went home. I was like, whatever. It just was a 3-day weekend. I'm used to that. So I called Danny Davis a few days after I got home to thank him for the opportunity. And Danny Davis had said that they really enjoyed me and they thought I had a lot of talent and had a lot to offer. So, he invited me to come back to OVW, which was a shock because I was in New Jersey at the time, living with my boyfriend. I had a great job, great benefits, did indies on the weekends. And when I heard Danny say that, I was like, I have to go. Something's telling me I have to go. So it was made very clear again, you're coming down to OVW. You're not guaranteed anything with WWE. So I took a chance. I quit a job I was making good money at. I quit a job I was loving with great benefits, 401k, all of that stuff for a chance. And that's how I got into it. My boyfriend's best friend, Inferno Kid, Danny Jamundo, was the one that convinced me to do it. So he was already down there and I stayed with him while I was down there. So it was thanks to him, he encouraged me to just try it. Well, it doesn't hurt, right? It's just, you're already doing it on the weekends anyway. You go do a promo, you go do a match, you go do some drills. I was already used to that because I worked out on a regular basis at home. So that's how I started. OVW.
I'll translate that. ¿Cómo llega esta oportunidad de llegar a OVW, que era el territorio de desarrollo de WWE? Ella menciona que hizo mucho networking durante su trayectoria por el circuito independiente, conoció muchas personas, una cosa llegó a otra y alguien le dijo, oye, están haciendo un campamento de reclutamiento con OVW, deberías hacerlo. Y ella como que, no afectaría mis posibilidades, vamos a hacerlo, no le pongo mucha fe, pero vamos a intentarlo. Somete y de repente aceptada, she got accepted. Y es como que, ok, está bien, no hay problema. Llego allí, vuelo, no hay ningún problema y estoy allí, hago todo el entrenamiento, ya estoy acostumbrado a este tipo de ejercicio, me voy, llamo a Davis y le digo, mira, estoy muy agradecido por la oportunidad, etcétera, etcétera. Y es como que, oye, nos gustó mucho tu trabajo, deberías venir acá. Y es como que, yo, ir allá. Y en aquel momento ella estaba trabajando en Nueva Jersey, estaba viviendo con su novio y su trabajo tenía buenos beneficios, estaba cómoda, estaba haciendo independent wrestling los fines de semana en New Jersey y era como que, ¿qué hago? Y el amigo de su novio, Inferno Kid, que estaba ya trabajando para OVW, fue quien la convence de decir, ok, deberías venir para acá. Él le dio esa valentía y ella tomó la decisión de llegar a OVW. What do you recall of that first day? Okay, you put the pen on the paper after a while, but once you put the pen on the paper, everything, works different. Everyone sees you, in a different way. So once you enter the building for the first time, the backstage ambience, the creative aspect, everything, what were your thoughts of the original OVW?
had a great time at OVW. We had a lot of creative control over the whole show, from your character to your storyline to the whole class. So it was great. Al Snow was fantastic. Rip Rogers was fantastic. Danny Davis, they all gave us that opportunity to be creative and have input on each other's storylines and how we can make the show better. When I was down there, our popularity got really big where we were doing shows almost every night after practice in another town. So we were able to really hone our craft, and, me, Deuce and Domino were able to really marinate and kind of really understand our characters and how our dynamics would work. So I had a wonderful time with OVW. It was amazing.
I'll translate that. Obviamente la pasó muy bien a OVW, le gustó su experiencia y llega el punto en que estaban tan populares que posterior a los entrenamientos todas las noches estaban haciendo lucha, todas las noches tenían un show distinto y obviamente la estaba pasando bien, estaba con Deuce Domino, lo que me lleva a mi próxima pregunta, which leads me to my next question. I got the opportunity to hear Cliff's version of the story, but what do you recall of when the producers and everyone pitched you the starting idea to say, hey, you're going to be Sherry Pie, you're going to be a manager, and you're going to be managing Deuce and Domino? What were your thoughts when they pitched you the initial idea, and what were your thoughts when you started working with them?
So Deuce and Domino came up with the idea. They were already doing a greaser's gimmick in OVW. I was not contracted yet. I was just in the intermediate class. And I would Wednesday nights be the ring girl on OVW TV. So I had known Deuce from when we started back in New Jersey. He lived in New Jersey and started at the same wrestling school I did. We never trained together, but I met him on the independents and knew he was in wrestling and stuff like that. So we already knew each other. And after one of the wrestling shows, he approached me because he knew me and they were looking for this girl, and they didn't know what she looked like. They didn't know what her name was, but she had to be on roller skates. We were doing a throwback. So Jimmy was just like, this is what we want to do. Would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, of course. Yeah. I'd be totally interested. And he's like, well, after the TV taping, he was going to show me some promos that him and Domino had been doing for the contracted class. So I watched their clips, and they had already been doing this greaser gimmick, but they needed me to come up with what I thought this girl would look like. So they were the ones that kind of gave me that opportunity to be a part of their shtick, so it was great. And, we put it together in a week, and it was a Wednesday night that Deuce approached me about it. Wednesday after TV, he showed me the clip. And then he said, listen, the office, Johnny Ace and everybody in talent relations were coming down that Tuesday to evaluate the OVW contracted class, which they did from time to time. And they wanted to present this idea. So we had really a week to get it together because Domino wasn't signed at the time either. So I went out and I found the skates and I kind of put this outfit together of what I thought she would look like. And we came up with my name 2 days before, WWE talent relations came down, and, we thought Sandy from Grease, Cherry from Outsiders, and Cherry was way more wrestling-esque. So we went with Cherry, which I love, and really marinated with it, and then just shocked everybody because we didn't tell a soul we were doing this. So that was exciting. The boys came up with the gimmick, and it was put together in a week. So it was great, the best.
I'll translate that interesting story. ¿Cómo nace este concepto de alinear a Sherry, a Deuce y Domino? Pues ellos mismos ya tenían a Deuce y Domino creados y estaban echándole el ojo a ella desde que ella era ring girl ahí mismo en OVW, todas las semanas, en la programación televisiva de OVW. Ya conocía a Cliff, que era Domino, lo conocía de New Jersey, tuvo la oportunidad de entrenar con él. Pues nuevamente, él no estaba empleado completamente bajo contrato con la empresa, ella tampoco, el único que estaba empleado era Deuce. Nace esta oportunidad de que tenemos esto en mente, pero queremos que tenga patines. We want her to have roller skates. Lo que era como que, ¿pero por qué? ¿Qué tienes en mente? Y nace esta idea en una semana, en just 1 week. deciden armar todo el muñeco antes de que llegue Johnny Ace y WWE Talent Relations allí a echarle el ojo a ver quién estaba. Y 2 días antes tenían una difícil decisión. ¿Sandy o Cherry? ¿Cuál de las dos era más efectiva? Decide irse por el nombre de Cherry porque era más wrestling related y le gustó la alternativa. Mostró el vestuario que tenía disponible en aquel momento dado, todo rápido, y así es que nace esta pareja o este equipo. Before, you know, well, technically it was a little bit after, but you had a feud with Katie Lee Burchill for the OVW Women's title. So many people recall you in OVW and WWE for your managing gig, but not many people know that you actually wrestled for the title over there a few times. So what do you recall of your rivalry and working with Katie Lee Burchill?
Oh, Katie Lee was great. I was very true to my character that Cherry didn't know how to wrestle. That's kind of how we were playing it. I was the good girl, they were the bad guys. So we were very creative in, you know, I ran from her, she chased me, and I took advantage of the situation when the boys got involved. So it was really fun. It was after a big feud we had with Cody and Sean. So it was kind of my turn to have a little bit of a title run. So she was great. We were actually transitioning on the road. So I was doing house shows with WWE and then coming down and having that feud with her. So it didn't last long, but what I did do with her was really fun. She's great. I love her.
I'll translate that. Antes de que ella fuese manejadora completamente como la reconocemos en WWE, también luchó ya siendo manejadora de Deuce Domino contra Katie Lee Burchill, que era la campeona mundial femenina de OVW. ¿Cómo nace este concepto? Bueno, Cherry estaba ya decidida de que era un personaje que ya no luchaba. Ella era la niña buena. Deuce y Domino eran los tough guys, los malos. Cherry era la niña inocente. Entonces, cada vez que ella simplemente corría y detrás de ella se iba Katie Lee Burchill, la buscaba, la cazaba, y cada vez que Deuce y Domino hacían algo para distraerla, ahí Cherry capitalizaba a su favor. Pero obviamente habló muy bien de Katie Lee, tuvo buena experiencia con ella y el resto es historia. A few months after that, I believe a few weeks actually after that, the three of you got a call. It was a pretty important call, and they notified you that you made it. You were going to the main roster. Not many people down there made it. So you guys made it before Cody, before Sean, before many talents that were there. So what do you recall of that phone call, how the three of you felt? And the most important thing, it was a moment to decide. Were you completely in the Deuce Domino and Cherry gimmick going to the main roster?
I remember getting a call from writer Chris DeJoseph. He was very big into our gimmick. He called me. The office kind of did really use me as their manager. So they would call me and then I would take care of the news and give it to the boys or whatever. So, which is funny, but yeah, he told me we were debuting. We originally were supposed to have vignettes, which never really panned out. And I don't know if Domino shared that with you. We were supposed to have vignettes that they were going to do, but they ended up not doing it. Ironically, when we got signed, we were supposed to debut a week after we got signed. Luckily, we didn't. And we debuted a year to the day that Cliff and I got signed, January 19th. And it was a blessing in disguise because we really had that full year to marinate and really work out our gimmick and work out the dynamics between ourselves and what we could do with the skates and kind of do a lot of like come up with little things in our repertoire. So it was a blessing in disguise. So when they called us up, we're super excited. We thought, you know, we've been down here for a year rather than a week after we created this, this trio. You just want to take the opportunity when it comes, but we were so happy that we had all that time to really kind of get ourselves together and be comfortable with it. So it was great.
I'll translate that. El plan original era que tuvieran vignettes, videos cortos mostrando quiénes eran ellos, y el plan original era que debutaran una semana después de haber firmado el contrato. ¡Qué rayo! Gracias a Dios, como ya dice, tuvieran esa bendición en disfraz de debutar un año después y poder entonces adaptarse a este nuevo formato. Chris DeJoseph es quien le da la llamada a ella, quien la trataron como una manejadora porque ella tuvo que darle la noticia a los muchachos. Y lo interesante de esto está en que Deuce Domino y Sherry ya sabían lo que estaban haciendo, pero tuvieron un año completo en la carretera para prepararse para este gran momento. Another big moment on the three of your careers was, I believe it was Milan, Italy, where Deuce and Domino won the WWE Tag Team titles from the longest reigning tag champs at that point, Paul London and Brian Kendrick. When the referee counted 3 that they rang the bell, what was the first thing that went through your mind?
It was insane. We're on, overseas. We're winning the titles for the first time. We won them very quickly after debuting. It was the most elated feeling to know that the 3 of us had made it together. All of our hard work had paid off. And it was just a memorable moment. It was just incredible. So it was exciting.
I'll translate that. Milán, Italia, Paul London y Brian Kendrick se enfrentan a Deuce y Domino, manejados por Sherry. De repente, 2 o 3 semanas después de haber debutado, 1, 2, 3, suena la campana, nuevos campeones en pareja y la mente de Sherry estalla. Obviamente estamos overseas, estamos allá en Italia y 2 o 3 semanas después gana los títulos. Qué más orgullo que tener la oportunidad de ver algo así. You feuded for a while with many tag teams, but I wanted to ask you, how was your experience backstage on the WWE main roster? How did they treat you? How do you feel the creative process compared to what it was on OVW?
Creative was a lot different. You could pitch what you wanted to pitch, but it was really just a bigger machine behind that. So, and they had plans for everybody. So for instance, I tell this story a lot. We did a semi-little kind of thing with Dave Batista and Ric Flair. And that kind of came about. It started when Deuce had a singles match against Batista. And we did the whole spot where every time Deuce does something and gets over on Batista, he like blows me a kiss and what have you. And then Batista, once he did it, he would blow me a kiss and I would just kind of flirt with Batista, like kind of like shyly. And it kind of grew from there. So we did something where Dave and Rick really kind of liked us a lot. And we did a tour in Singapore, Bangkok, Australia.
Wow.
And Dave was great. Rick was fantastic too. So I kind of got really friendly with them and they were great for us. And I remember being in the hotel, I think it was Bangkok. And David told me that Rick and him wanted to do a program with us, that it was really they were really enjoying it. And he was going to call Vince while we were overseas. So I was like, so excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. Because it was right after the segment where Deuce is backstage looking for me and he finds me in a locker room and I come out and it's Batista's locker room. But as we roll away, it's Batista goes into his locker room and it's Flair and Flair does his thing. So all the fans loved that. They have always asked me about that backstage segment, which was great. So unfortunately, Vince had other plans for Rick and Dave. So even with them being behind it and pitching it, it didn't really work out, which stinks, but that's just kind of shows the machine behind there. It's like, that's great. The top guys on our program wanted to do something with us. We got free matches out of it. But it didn't go where we could have taken it, and done a lot with it. But that's just the difference with OVW. We had a lot of creative control as opposed to what WWE does. They have different plans for different people. So, not that we couldn't have done a program, but with them being the top guys and us kind of being a lot newer, it wasn't going to be something they were going to put a lot of steam behind just yet, at least. So yeah, that's how it works.
I'll translate that. De OVW a WWE hay mucha diferencia. OVW tenía más control creativo, era más libre. En WWE, obviamente, ellos ya tenían unos planes estructurados para todas las personas y todo afectaba. Un ejemplo de eso es aquel famoso segmento en donde Sherry sale del camerino de Batista, que no sabía de quién era la superestrella, que el Domino estaba buscando en todas partes, y después descubre que era Batista el que estaba allí. Pues ellos trabajaron un tour overseas con Batista y con Ric Flair, en Bangkok, Tailandia, en Singapur y también en Australia. En ese periodo de tiempo, Rick y Batista estaban muy contentos con el trabajo de Deuce Domino y Sherry, y querían, de hecho, trabajar con ellos un programa. Insistieron en varias ocasiones, propusieron varias ideas, siendo los top guys, pero Vince ya tenía otros planes creativos para ellos. Y lamentablemente esto no se dio en televisión, pero sí se dio en un periodo de tiempo en un tours overseas, que era donde por lo general tuvieron más oportunidad de trabajar, tal vez porque eran más nuevos que los top guys en aquel momento, pero la experiencia de trabajar con ellos sí, siempre fue muy buena. Speaking of creative decisions, who took the decision of separating you from Deuce and Domino and that randomly like put Maurice with them? Like, do you had a say in that matter? How do you feel with that decision?
I thought it was too soon, but I think because they were splitting off for the Divas competition, there was no full-on discussion. It just kind of happened organically. Because with the Divas competition, I get this a lot. I don't know if that was legitimate where people, I know people were allowed to vote, but did they go by what people voted, or was it that WWE was creating that storyline? I just went with it, did what they asked me every day. So I think it just organically happened where they wanted another girl, because at that point I was never involved in anything. I was just with the boys, and we were always very protective of not only anybody touching me, but me wrestling or anything like that. I was just the roller skating girlfriend, sister. So that was really the only time I was ever isolated. And because the competition played out where Maurice got kicked out first, I don't know if they planned it that way. So we just kind of organically went that way. And then it just made sense when Maurice was first, and it itself made its own storyline. So again, I have no idea. I thought it worked out well. I thought there was so much more that Deuce Domino and I could have done. I thought it was way too soon, but I was willing to, do what I wanted to do. Not what I wanted to do, because I didn't have a say in it. I just followed my direction of what they wanted me to do. And either way, it was sad because I wanted to be with the boys because we had done so much, but that competition made me feel really good about myself, because either the fans really wanted to see me, which was a great feeling, or if it was the office was really not listening to the fans and making their own creative, that's a win-win for me. Because either the office really wants me or the fan really wants me. I'm happy with either. So I was just loving it as I was going through it. So
I'll translate that. Aquella decisión cuestionable de separar a Sherry de Deuce y Domino, porque ocurre, y obviamente dice que no tuvo oportunidad de decidir en eso, ella simplemente hacía lo que se le pedía, pero sí, ella entiende que fue muy prematuro, fue muy, muy pronto, demasiado pronto, pudieron haberse hecho muchísimas cosas con ellos y lamentablemente pues no se hicieron. Lo interesante de esto está en que el público lo respaldaba, la oficina lo respaldaba, pero de la nada deciden pues traer a Maurice a la ecuación y cambia un poco la dinámica de siempre nos va a quedar pues ese ¿qué pudo haber sido? Which actually leads me to my next question. Your first match in the main roster was against Maurice. So how do you feel, to be granted the opportunity to quote unquote wrestle, because you were Sherry, the girl that was innocent, that didn't want it to wrestle, that was just like the good girl. So yeah, with the gimmick and everything, how was that experience for you?
It was fine because it met the storyline, and that's all that mattered to me. Having that match with her, went along with, and I'm not big into I won or lost or anything like that. So the storyline planned out. It stunk that it was so soon, but it is what it is. I mean, everything happens for a reason, so I was okay with it.
I'll translate that. Obviamente la experiencia de Maurice, como que todo ocurre por un motivo, which actually leads me to another question. You had the opportunity to be one of the first people to actually wrestle with Natalya Neidhart on WWE, who's a great friend of yours as well. How was, that opportunity to work with her in the ring and still have that friendship after so many years?
It was great. I loved that I got to be her debut match. If you've ever met her, she is the most kindest, selfless, amazing, generous human being on the planet. She loves this business. You can tell it's running in her blood. She was very kind to me. We instantly gravitated towards each other. We just got along so well. And I was so happy that I was that match for her. And it was memorable because we did really well. I mean, they wanted something from her and they wanted something from me, and to come back from the curtain and everybody in Gorilla was like standing up and applauding was like, oh my gosh, like we did what we needed to do. And Fit was so pleased, and they got the reactions. I gave them the reactions they were looking for. She gave them everything that they wanted from her. So it was great. And it was nice that I could be that for her, because, you know, our friendship means so much to me, and to know that it's been so strong since then, it shows what kind of person she is.
I'll translate that. Obviamente Natalia es una persona muy amable, una persona dispuesta a dar mucho, y ella fue la primera lucha de Natalia Neidhart. Posterior a esa lucha, ella narra como ya van de camino al camerino las dos, y de momento está todo el mundo de pie, está todo el mundo aplaudiendo. Fit Finlay les da las gracias porque obtuvo exactamente lo que buscaba de ambas competidoras, y el hecho de que puedan conservar su relación de amistad con Natalia Neidhart después de tantos años simplemente fue una experiencia increíble. After that, you parted ways with the WWF, both took separate pathways. What happened with you after that? Like, why did you disappear from the wrestling industry?
After I was let go, it was really hard. You know, we were let go. I was let go in that whole economy crash. So it was a tough time, and wrestling was hard for me in a sense that I was a normal girl. You're in a microscopic world, and when I got let go, and the things that were being said as to why I was let go really kind of affected my confidence. So I did a few indies, I did a few signings, and I just needed to step away to work on myself, because I just had a huge self-esteem and confidence issue, and I needed to focus on that and fix that. So I did step away for quite some time, and I needed to find myself and get myself right. And it was hard, because I still loved wrestling. I still wanted to be there, but I just wasn't in the right space. So I needed to take that time, and people need to check out sometimes to just make sure that they're okay and focusing on themselves. So that's kind of what I did. And, you know, occasionally I would do stuff, and I don't want to oversaturate areas, because I want people to still, you know, come out to see me. So I do them periodically now, not as much, but this last one it was so good to see everybody, because it'd been, and it wasn't just me, because sometimes I've done them by myself without the guys, and this one was our first time being together. So it was so good to see them.
I'll translate that. Posterior a su salida de WWF o de WWE, fue algo muy difícil para ella, que afectó su confianza en sí misma por ciertas cosas que le dieron a la hora de dejar la libertad. Ella hizo 2 o 3 apariciones en el circuito independiente, hizo varias firmas, y necesitaba trabajar consigo misma, necesitaba encontrarse a sí misma, y decide aislarse un poco de la industria. Aparecía de cuando en vez, pero hace poco, el mes pasado, regresa, y hace un mes vuelve a ver a todo el mundo, ve a Deuce, ve a Domino, ve a todos sus amigos, y es como que qué bueno verlos a todos, y ver a todos los fanáticos. Simplemente sintió ese amor por todo, y definitivamente fue lo que la trajo de vuelta. I also want to say something else in Spanish. Pueden seguir a Sherry en todas sus redes sociales, Instagram como @DDCChick o DDCChick, CHICK. Ahí la pueden encontrar también de igual manera en Twitter como @FMRDivaSherry, FMR Diva Sherry. Y de igual manera la pueden encontrar en cameo.com/DDShick, cameo.com/DDShick para todos ustedes. Esto ya va a aparecer al final en un arte. Gracias a Jacobo por la edición y a Lu por el arte. Sherry, it's been more than an honor for us to have you here as our guest. Thank you so much for your time. But before we go, I wanted to ask you a last question. Deuce Domino and Sherry announced their return after 10 years into the wrestling industry, and everyone is like, it needed to happen. It was meant to be. So
Aww.
What can we expect from the three of you in this new return and in this new chapter of your careers?
Well, you'll have to hang out and see. We're really happy. I'm so happy that you had me on the show. This is great. I haven't done these in a long time, and it's been so much fun. And I'm glad that you gave me the opportunity to reach out and chat a little bit more with some of my fans and your audience as well.
And thank you for your time. Y hagan pendiente entonces a Lucha Libre Online. Este fue Sherry, Michael Morales Torres para Lucha Libre Online, la marca número 1 de Pro Wrestling y Combat Sports en español.